Now, it's said, isn't it, that only about 20% of the time that we spend at work is influenced by any formal training we've done. So is there a contribution that e-learning can make to the other 80% of our time?
Definitely. I think we're all doing it all the time anyway, when we're using Google, when we're using the kind of resources that we have in our works. But again, a couple of years ago we were asking organisations, are they planning to use technology to help support that informal learning? And at the time, about 79% of the organisations we surveyed said that they wanted to use technology in some way to help informal learning. Now, the last couple of years has actually shown that that's actually quite a challenge. That how do you encourage the informal that's going on in your organisation? But this year we're finding about 40% have actually started to look at this issue, and they're doing it in one of two ways. One, about 50% of those are actually looking at delivering, making more resources available, being more kind of strategic in their resources. So they're doing things like doing online books available, make it so that people can search and get to information really quickly, really immediately, and making it easier. They're consolidating resources within their organisation. They're opening up perhaps the traditional e-learning libraries so that more people can use them. But I think the interesting thing is the other 50% who are actually using some of the more collaborative technologies to kind of connect people together. And that's a very, very interesting process, because then you can actually help people to not only be on a course, but then think about how they're applying that learning once they get back into the office, once they get back into the workplace. They can connect with each other in the use of blogs and wikis and very targeted interventions which bring people together around specific areas. And there's a lot very, very interesting examples of that going on in the workplace at the moment, and actually getting some quite interesting measurable results as a result of it as well, which is something that many people thought wasn't going to be possible.
Yeah.
And the technology applied in quite a strategic and thoughtful way can actually start to really harness that tacit energy and knowledge within an organisation, and start to apply it and link back into formal learning as well. So we're definitely seeing some strides, not as fast I think as people predicted a few years ago, but we're certainly seeing some movement in that area now.
Okay, so e-learning is genuinely addressing the needs of those that are doing the learning. That being the case, does it mean the traditional trainer is becoming a dying breed?
Well, I can understand why perhaps in the past the trainer whose main role is facilitating a group in a classroom in a traditional way would feel threatened by the concept of a big shift towards self-paced learning. Because they may not see themselves as the sort of people that create that learning or support it. It would be a very different role for them. They may not relish that prospect. But because e-learning is so multifaceted now, so it's just as likely that you're going to be using, say, web conferencing to run live sessions across geographic boundaries, or perhaps facilitating discussions using forums and wikis and so on, and social networking sites. I think that their communication skills and their skills of facilitation can be employed just using the channel of computers and networks instead of being face to face. But of course that's not still going to be something that every trainer relishes. But I think the vast majority will find that once they engage with technology and start to explore what's really possible with it, that there's a home for them in that new world as well.
So if a trainer feels they're lagging behind a little bit with their knowledge of this, what can they do about it?
Well, I think that it is necessary to do something about it. I've often thought that if you were to go back 30 years, anybody who was entering the teaching or training profession would have been familiar with every medium at their disposal. I know they didn't have as many. They would have had to be able to deal with film projectors and video recorders and blackboards and whiteboards and flip charts and a relatively simple technology by modern standards, but they all would have felt they had to have some competence in it. Yeah. And at some point, as technology progressed and the media options increased, they sort of gave up and felt that this was now a job for specialists, and they didn't engage. I think they've got to catch up, and they've got to catch up fast, because I think it's absolutely vital if you want to have a career in learning development, that you're versatile and you're able to turn your hand to using a wide range of different media. So, I mean, there are courses available. There are plenty of ways of engaging in informal ways with technology and learning from others. But it's not something, if I was a learning development person who wasn't engaged with technology, I wouldn't be leaving it too long, because I think organisations are going to value those people who are versatile and able to adapt to new technology. And they're going to be, I think, a bit wary of working with people who are holding that back.
Okay. Thanks for that. Well, a couple of bits of advice I'd just like to ask from each of you now, just to wrap up. The first one, Clive, can we ask you what advice you would give to an organisation that was now just starting to go down that e-learning route?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital that they develop an understanding of the scope of e-learning, of what's possible and what the opportunities are, but also not to get carried away with technology. I think, as we've been discussing, it isn't really about technology. Technology is just the enabler. It's just a channel. In fact, it's still people at the who are using that technology, and it's people who are designing the content that the technology disseminates. So not to get carried away with that, but just to be thinking about what it is that they can do, which they couldn't do in the past if they were to use computers as a medium, and how that would provide them with efficiencies, and how that would provide them with opportunities to do things perhaps more quickly or more cheaply than they have in the past. I would say you've got to network as quickly as you can with other organisations who've been doing similar things, not to learn by your mistakes. I mean, obviously, to a point, you're bound to do that, but not to make all the same mistakes that every other organisation has made. There's so much good evidence now, as Towards Maturity have found in their surveys, and that about what works and what doesn't work. And I think people have got to pick up on that, and that way they can get going quickly.
Excellent. And Laura, if an organisation feels that they're stuck in a bit of a rut training-wise, or have had a bad experience in the past, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I think that's quite interesting, because what we've been looking at in our survey work is those who are actually getting better results, and I think one of the key areas that you can really look at are, the extent to which you're kind of blending and using this whole range of technologies that Clive's been talking about. Have you only been delivering one thing in one way for the last 10 years? Is it time to refresh and revise what you're doing? Also, I would say have a look at the relevance. Because people are very keen to actually access programs which are relevant and helpful to them right now. And on that note, I would also suggest that you need to look at the communication around this. We've found that many learners do not even know what's available to them. So kind of having a good communication program. And then finally, the other thing that I would really concentrate on are the engagement of managers, and not just senior managers, but we've found that I think something like 55% of the 3,000 learners we've interviewed over the last 3 or 4 years have said that the person who influences them most about getting involved in these new ways of learning is their manager. The training department count for less than 10%. So, are there ways that we can actually think about how do we engage the managers? How do we support them and give these e-learning tools to the managers to help them in the way that they're running their businesses and the way they're running their teams as well. So there are some very practical things that we can actually start doing. And then the final thing is just to think about the way we're supporting learners. Again, picking up on what Clive said earlier, not leaving individuals in isolation, because that's often the thing that puts them off. And the way that technology can use through virtual classrooms, through the different ways of connecting with e-tutors, to actually really think about supporting. So many things to be able to look at. And also to look at, say, the benchmarking results that are out there, see where you're doing well against the factors that we actually know actually make a difference, and then just address the weaknesses.
That's been a very interesting insight. Laura, Clive, thank you very much.